I used to laugh whenever people joked that my cat, Oliver, was the laziest creature they had ever seen. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. Oliver had mastered the art of doing absolutely nothing. He'd stretch himself across the couch like he owned the place, blink slowly at anyone who dared disturb him, and spend most of his day napping in whatever sunbeam happened to land on the floor. But if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I'll never forget for the rest of my life, it's that appearances can fool everyone. Because the day Oliver saved us all was the day I realized that laziness had never been his defining trait. Awareness was. And now, every time I look at him, I still feel a chill thinking about what would have happened if he hadn't acted when he did. It all started 3 weeks before everything unfolded, though at the time I didn't understand the significance of what was happening. I live in a quiet neighborhood, one of those places where the loudest sound you usually hear is the distant rumble of a lawnmower, or the occasional dog barking when the mail truck drives by. I'd moved there 5 years earlier, drawn by the idea of a slow, peaceful life after too many years juggling deadlines, stress, and long work nights that never seemed to end. Oliver had come into my life during that transition, adopted from a local shelter on a day when I thought I just needed company. What I didn't know was that he'd eventually become far more than that. From the moment I brought him home, Oliver had made it clear that he intended to do things on his own terms. He wasn't aggressive, just reserved, observant. The kind of cat who seemed to notice every detail in the room but refused to acknowledge any of it, unless absolutely necessary. I used to tease him gently, whispering, "One day, you'll surprise me," as if he could understand the irony. Turns out he understood more than I did. That week, though, something felt off. Not with Oliver, not yet, but with the atmosphere around the house. It was subtle at first. Lights flickering for a second or two, like the power was flirting with the idea of going out but never fully committing. The strange humming noise coming from somewhere behind the walls that I dismissed as old wiring settling, though my house was barely a decade old. And then the drafts. Warm drafts, which didn't make any sense. I'd walk from the hallway to the living room and feel a sudden wave of heat brush against me, even though the thermostat said everything was normal. I told myself I was imagining things. Work had been rough, I was tired, and maybe I was just more sensitive than usual. And every time I doubted myself, I'd glance over and see Oliver sprawled on the back of the couch like usual, eyes half closed, head resting lazily on the cushion. If something had been truly wrong, surely he would have reacted. Right? But then it started. The first night Oliver acted strange, I was sitting on the floor, sorting through old boxes I'd been meaning to organize for months. It was late, past midnight, and the house was quiet except for the soft humming of the refrigerator. I remember hearing the faintest crackling sound, like someone lightly crumpling paper in the next room. I paused, listened, waited. But the sound stopped, and I shrugged it off. Probably just the house settling. Houses do that, especially at night. Oliver, however, suddenly lifted his head and stared toward the hallway. Not in that casual, uninterested way he usually observed things. This time his eyes were wide, focused, alert. His ears were pointed forward, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. He didn't move, but every muscle in his body was tense. I whispered his name, expecting him to flick his tail or blink at me lazily. But he didn't even acknowledge my voice. He just kept staring. That alone should have made me uneasy. But instead of trusting my instincts, I picked up another box and kept working, telling myself that cats stare at nothing all the time. Except Oliver wasn't staring at nothing. A few minutes later, he stood up abruptly and jumped off the couch. Another red flag. Oliver didn't jump off anything unless food was involved, but he moved quickly, almost silently, trotting to the hallway and sniffing the air. I followed him, curiosity outweighing caution, and found him sitting perfectly still at the far end of the corridor, looking at the wall. "Oliver, what is it?" I whispered again. He didn't answer, obviously, but he did something I'd never seen him do before. He pressed one paw against the wall, almost gently, like he was trying to feel something through the plaster. I placed my hand on the same wall, but all I felt was smooth paint and cool drywall. "You're being weird tonight," I murmured, leaning closer. Oliver slowly backed away, tail puffed slightly. Not fully fluffed like he was frightened, but enough to show he was uneasy. I could see it. Something was bothering him. And then the warm draft hit again, passing over my arm in a gentle wave. I froze. This time I felt it clearly, unmistakably, like standing too close to a vent that shouldn't be blowing anything. A soft exhale of heat, almost humid, brushing against my skin. My heart skipped, and I immediately checked the ceiling, expecting to find an air vent. There wasn't one. That hallway had no vents, no windows, no reason for warm air to be drifting anywhere. I forced myself to step back. "Okay," I said quietly. That was weird. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thin. Oliver didn't move for almost a full minute, just watching the wall, as if waiting for something to happen. Eventually, though, he blinked, turned around, and trotted back into the living room like he'd decided his job for the night was done. I followed him, unsettled and tired, and crawled into bed. I slept lightly, waking a few times to check if he was still at the foot of the mattress. He was. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. The flickering lights didn't come back, and the strange drafts disappeared. I felt silly even thinking about it, but Oliver's behavior lingered in my mind. I watched him closely all day, yet he acted like his usual lazy self, sleeping on the counter, sleeping on the windowsill, sleeping in my laundry basket. Nothing unusual. But that night, Oliver woke me up. He jumped onto my chest, something he had never done in the 5 years I'd owned him, and pressed his nose against my cheek with urgency. His whiskers tickled my face, and his claws lightly pricked through my shirt as he tried to push himself closer. I groaned, half asleep. But when I opened my eyes, I saw his pupils were huge. His breathing was quick. He wasn't trying to cuddle. He was trying to warn me. "Oliver? What's wrong?" I whispered. He turned his head sharply toward the bedroom door, ears rotating like little satellite dishes honing in on something. I listened. At first I heard nothing. Then, barely, something that made my chest tighten. A faint buzzing sound. Deep, low, like something electrical struggling. I got up, slid out of bed, and placed my feet on the floor. The second I stood, the buzzing grew louder, and I swear I felt the floorboards vibrate under my toes. Not violently, just enough that I couldn't pretend it was my imagination. As I crept toward the hallway, Oliver stayed at my heel, following so closely I nearly tripped over him. His tail was puffed again, but this time more dramatically. He was frightened. When I reached the hallway, the warm draft returned stronger than before. A wave of heat pushed against me. Not unbearable, but wrong. Wrong in a way that tightened my throat. And then I heard it. A sharp popping sound, like something snapping inside the wall. That's when I understood. Something electrical was failing behind those walls. In the split second before panic took over, everything happened at once. The lights flickered. A low crackling sound built up like a fuse struggling. The air grew hotter, thicker, and Oliver, my lazy, unbothered cat, suddenly sprinted ahead of me down the hallway, stopping at the exact spot he'd been staring at the night before. He looked back at me and yowled. Not a meow, a warning, a cry demanding action. That's when the smell hit me. A faint scent that made my stomach twist instantly. Burning plastic. My hands shook as I pressed my palm to the wall again. And this time it was warm. Hot, actually. Too hot. "Oliver," I whispered, voice trembling. You knew something was wrong." But I didn't have time to think. I ran to the living room, grabbed my phone, and dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. I explained quickly, probably too quickly, but the operator understood immediately. She told me to leave the house at once. But my cat, I started. Take him with you, she said firmly. Right now. I scooped Oliver into my arms, and for once he didn't resist. He curled against my chest, trembling slightly, burying his face into my shirt as I rushed to the door. The moment I stepped outside, the buzzing behind the walls reached its peak. Then everything went black inside the house. I didn't see what was happening behind the walls, but I heard enough. A loud crack, a muffled burst, a sound that made me grip Oliver tighter as the first responders pulled into my driveway minutes later. My neighbors were waking up, looking out their windows, stepping onto porches in confusion as smoke began to seep from the side of my house. Thin at first, then stronger. I held Oliver close as firefighters rushed inside. I'll never forget the moment the captain walked back out and approached me. "You got out just in time," he said. "Another few minutes and things would have gotten a lot worse. You said your cat alerted you?" I nodded, my eyes welling up. He glanced down at Oliver, who was clinging to me like a child. "You should be grateful," he said softly. "He didn't save just you. He saved your whole block." My breath hitched. What do you mean?" I asked. He explained that the issue inside the wall hadn't just been a faulty wire. It had heated the insulation enough that if the pressure built up any further, it could have triggered a chain reaction. It wasn't just my house at risk. My neighbors' units shared segments of wiring, and if the situation escalated, it could have spread before anyone had time to react. And the worst part? There had been no external signs yet. Nothing anyone else would have noticed. Nothing except the sounds, the warmth, the flickering. Things I had dismissed. But Oliver hadn't. My lazy cat had been listening, watching, understanding something I didn't. When the captain left to rejoin his team, I sank onto the curb, holding Oliver in my lap, and for the first time in my life, I cried into his fur. Not because I was sad, but because I finally realized what I almost lost, and what I almost ignored. I kept running my fingers through Oliver's fur, whispering into the top of his head, even though I knew he didn't understand the words themselves. But I swear, he understood the feeling behind them. He always had that uncanny ability to sense what was going on inside me long before I spoke it. As I held him close, he finally relaxed, his breathing slowing, his paws stretching out gently as he leaned into me. The firefighters moved in and out of my house for nearly an hour, assessing the damage, checking the wiring, and working to ensure nothing else would spark. I sat on the curb the entire time, refusing to leave Oliver's side, and he refused to leave mine. Eventually, one of the responders approached me again and said I could go back inside for a brief moment if I wanted to gather essential items. I nodded, though my body hesitated. Stepping back into the house didn't feel the same. Even though the main issue had been stopped before it escalated, the smell of something burned lingered softly in the air. The walls felt too silent, too still, missing that subtle hum of comfort a home usually has. I walked carefully, holding Oliver against my shoulder as I moved from room to room, grabbing my purse, a change of clothes, some documents, and Oliver's food container. I looked around slowly, realizing how much worse everything could have been, and how close I'd come to losing the life I'd built here. When I returned outside, my neighbor, Mrs. Harris, the kind of elderly woman who always waved from her porch rocker, hurried over with worry etched across her face. "Honey, are you all right?" she asked, resting a hand gently on my arm. "We saw the lights, the fire trucks. What happened?" Before I could answer, Oliver lifted his head and looked at her, his expression calm, as if he had suddenly decided the entire situation had been handled, and it was now time to act like the serene, unfazed cat everyone knew. Mrs. Harris chuckled weakly. "Well, he doesn't look bothered at all." I swallowed hard. "He's the reason we're all standing here calmly right now." When I explained everything, her eyes widened, and she looked at Oliver with newfound respect, almost awe. "My goodness, I always said animals can sense things we can't," That little guy might look like he sleeps all day, but he's got a mind sharper than any of us." I nodded, hugging him closer. I'll never doubt him again. The firefighters eventually cleared the house, recommending I stay with someone for the night while electricians handled the repairs. Mrs. Harris insisted, absolutely insisted, that I stay with her. "No neighbor of mine is sleeping in a motel after something like this," she said, waving off my attempts to protest. She set up a small guest room for me, complete with an old quilt she'd made decades earlier and a little cushioned basket she quickly repurposed as a makeshift cat bed. Oliver sniffed it once, circled twice, and promptly ignored it, choosing instead to curl up beside me on the mattress where he could stretch out comfortably. As I settled under the quilt, everything finally hit me at once. The exhaustion, the fear, the gratitude. My body trembled slightly, and a few tears slipped onto the pillow. Oliver lifted his head and gently pressed it against my cheek, purring softly. Not the loud, rumbling purr he used when he was hungry or playful, but that low, soothing vibration he gave only when he sensed something heavy inside me. It calmed me in a way nothing else could. I stroked his back slowly. "You really saved us," I whispered. "All of us." He blinked, then lowered his head and tucked himself against my chest. And in that quiet moment, in a stranger's guest room, listening to the soft ticking of an old clock on the wall, I knew deep down that what he did wasn't an accident. Oliver had understood something I didn't catch, and he'd been trying to tell me long before I finally listened. The following morning, electricians arrived early to inspect everything more deeply. I returned to my house once they gave the okay, though the idea of stepping inside still made my chest tighten. Oliver trotted beside me with a casual confidence that almost made me laugh. Here I was, nervous and hesitant, while he walked like nothing unusual had happened at all. The electricians confirmed what the firefighters had warned me about. The issue behind the wall had been extremely dangerous. Not just risky, critical, a failure waiting to escalate. They told me I was unbelievably lucky to have caught it when I did. I glanced down at Oliver, who sat at my feet licking his paw like this was an ordinary day. "I didn't catch it," I said softly. He did. Word spread around the neighborhood quickly. People I barely talked to before approached me days later, asking if the story was true. The idea of a lazy cat saving an entire block seemed almost poetic, and I couldn't help but smile each time I retold it. Not out of pride in my own actions, but in awe of his. Even my sister called me, half laughing, half scolding me for underestimating Oliver all these years. "You never know with cats," she said. "You think they're sleeping? They're studying the world." The repairs took about a week, and during that time I stayed with Mrs. Harris, who spoiled Oliver shamelessly. She gave him tuna, soft treats, and more attention than he'd ever tolerated from me. But to my surprise, he actually accepted most of it, especially the extra pats she'd give him behind the ears. She'd say, "A hero deserves proper gratitude," and he would close his eyes and lift his chin proudly. When we finally moved back home, I expected Oliver to stay glued to me for comfort after everything. Instead, he wandered around the house inspecting every room, every corner, every shelf, as though doing a thorough safety check. Only once he seemed satisfied did he hop onto the couch, curl up in his favorite spot, and resume his usual nap schedule. 12 hours a day, minimum. But I watched him differently now. Every slow blink, every ear flick, every quiet stretch meant more. He had shown me that his laziness had never been laziness. It was calmness, stillness, awareness. He never wasted energy unless he needed to. And the moment he needed to, he acted with a certainty and urgency that changed everything. One evening, about a month later, I sat on the living room floor sorting through the same boxes I'd been organizing the night he first sensed something was wrong. The house was quiet again, but in a comforting way this time. The wiring had been replaced. The air felt cool and steady, and I had installed a new set of smoke detectors just to be safe. As I packed photo frames and old notebooks into a bin, I watched Oliver hop onto the arm of the couch and stretch with exaggerated slowness before settling into a loaf position. His eyes half closed, but he kept glancing at me, making sure I was still there. "You know," I said, smiling at him, "I'll never underestimate you again." He blinked slowly, one of those affectionate cat blinks that feels like a quiet little, "I know." And sometimes my friends ask me what it felt like when Oliver warned me that night, how I knew it wasn't just a coincidence, how I was able to tell the difference between an ordinary cat behavior and a meaningful one. The truth is, there's no perfect explanation. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic moment. It was more like a series of small signs that didn't make sense at first. Little puzzles that only formed the bigger picture when I finally paid attention. Oliver had noticed the warmth behind the wall before it became dangerous. He'd heard the buzzing before it became loud enough for me to detect. He'd sensed the urgency long before I did. And if he hadn't jumped onto my chest, forcing me awake, forcing me to listen, I don't know what would have happened. Some people say animals have instincts humans don't. Others believe they have senses we've lost touch with over time. But I believe something slightly different. I believe they pay attention in ways we often fail to. They live in the present, not distracted by schedules or deadlines or the noise in our minds. They feel subtle changes. They notice what shifts. They understand when something feels wrong. And sometimes, they act in ways that remind us why we need them. Oliver is still lazy. Very lazy. He still spends half his day lounging in my laundry basket or sunbathing on the windowsill. He still ignores half the toys I buy him. He still refuses to run unless a treat bag crinkles. But every time I watch him sleeping peacefully, I catch myself whispering, "Thank you. Thank you for choosing that moment to show who you really are." Because no matter how peaceful my neighborhood seems, no matter how quiet my home feels, I know one thing for sure. Oliver is always listening, always watching, always aware. And when the moment comes, if it ever comes again, he'll be ready long before I am. So whenever someone jokes and calls him lazy now, I just smile and say, "You have no idea." Then I look at Oliver, curled up on the couch, his tail wrapped around his paws, his eyes drifting closed with that serene confidence he carries like a crown. He saved us all, and he knows it. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means more than I can express. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves animals or needs a reminder of how extraordinary our quiet companions can be. Thank you so much for watching, and may you and your loved ones always be protected, sometimes in ways you least expect.